Welcome. Here we have a cross of the Sphinx, a manifesting generator 4-6 on the cross of the Sphinx. And we have a lot of definition we're looking at. We're looking at 8 of the 9 centers defined. Everything except the undefined ego, which is still has 2 of the 4 gates activated. And it's a split definition chart. We're looking at split definition, 2 distinct areas of definition. In fact, we have the authority in the sacral connected to the spleen, the sacral also connected to the root, which then goes on to the packed solar plexus with all but 3 gates. It has 4 out of 7 gates activated there. And then that goes up to the throat and down to the G center, and that's all one unit. And then you'll see up top we have the head and ajna, which is the other area of definition. And it's a wide split, not a simple split. The difference being that the simple split can be bridged by a single gate. A wide split needs more than a gate. In this case, a channel. So the 4-6 manifesting generator with emotional authority. The authority here is connected to the root through the 1949. So here's someone, like everyone who has emotional authority, who needs to wait for that emotional wave to stop being nervous, to stop being turbulent, to release in some way. And what we see is, with this specific 1949 activation, that it's a tribal ratchet wave. It's a ratchet wave, which means this is an emotional wave that builds and builds and builds until it breaks. It's an emotional wave that has a last straw and then it breaks. And this is an emotional wave where it could be something that happened days or weeks before that finally bubbles up to the surface that causes that wave to crash. It's bubbling up, it's building up, and it reaches this breaking point. And that's how that clarity works. Excuse the noise. This is absurd. I'm on a street that's usually empty here in Santa Fe, and for some reason there's an endless stream of cars going by. Must be something going on. In any case, I'll be off the street momentarily. I'm about to walk the Santa Fe River Trail, and it stretches for miles along the Santa Fe River, which is really an arroyo, meaning sometimes there's water in it, sometimes there isn't. So here is an emotional being, a tribally emotional being with a ratchet wave, where that nervousness is going to build up, and then it's going to break. And in that moment of release, there can be clarity. What is it to be an emotional being? What is emotional clarity? The human design practitioner Cohn Hillewart said that it's like you're trying to see something and you're either looking through mud or you're looking through clear water. He likened it to clear water. The joke is kind of that, clarity is like an orgasm. Someone asks, did I have one? Well, if you're asking, then you didn't, because you would know. But I don't think that's always true. I mean, I've heard that joked around, but I think it is sometimes hard to know. And I also think it's possible to go past clarity with the mind, to have reached a moment of clarity, and then for the mind to convince you to reconsider and to actually lose that clarity and not stay true to it. In fact, I would say emotional clarity is an event, and you must remain faithful to the event. You must have fidelity to the event of that clarity. And I know this as an unemotional person. That is, I do not have defined solar plexus. However, when you don't have a center, you get to learn all about it. The undefined centers are here to learn about what that center really is. You can learn about, here's someone who can learn about the ego. When you have all 8 centers defined except for the ego, you're here to learn about that ego. And the same is true for all of the gates that aren't activated, and the same is true for the channels that aren't activated. You can learn all about that openness. And everyone, even if you have 9 centers defined, everyone is more open than not, because you still have all those gates and channels open. We're always more open than we are defined in terms of gates and channels. Okay, so what is emotional clarity then? Emotional clarity is when the nervousness goes away. And emotional clarity is when you no longer feel a nervousness, a charged nervousness about something. It's also when a complete cycle has been experienced. The cycle of the up and the down wave. When you've experienced something build up and break and then start to build up again, maybe even. So, what is it to be an emotional being? How do you live as an emotional being? Well, you're here to savor the emotional experience. See, there's 2 mistakes that emotional beings make. And by the way, me having undefined solar plexus, I'm here to tell them. That's what everyone with a defined center needs, someone with the undefined center to diagnose them. All the defined spleens out there need the undefined spleen doctor, because it's the undefined spleen doctor who can actually experience the health of the other. All the defined egos out there need an undefined ego to tell them if their willpower is really in it, to tell them what their ego is doing, if they're overvaluing or undervaluing, and so on. So similarly, when you have a defined solar plexus, you need the undefined solar plexus people in your life to remind you how you're feeling, really. Part of you knows, but at the same time, a lot of people with a defined solar plexus are not necessarily in touch with their emotions. You're emotional beings who don't really necessarily know your emotions. You can come to learn them, and they reveal themselves to you. But this is where the undefined solar plexus can be great, With undefined solar plexus, you can tell someone who has a defined solar plexus, hey, you're in a bad mood. And they'll say, no, I'm not. And you'll say, yeah, I can feel it. You're don't make any decisions right now. Or, wow, you're really, really excited about this. You're kind of over the top. Wait until you feel a little more middle about it. But of course, nobody can substitute for your own authority. And that's true in all those cases I was saying. Someone's splenic authority, the undefined spleen can't tell them any information that helps them make a decision. That's up to the spleen. Or an ego authority person. The undefined ego can't tell them anything. Hey, your willpower's not in it. Yeah, it is. Well, what's the undefined ego to do? The undefined ego can tell them their experience of that defined ego frequency. But that's it. And the same is true for you. So obviously, you don't rely on undefined solar plexus. It's simply that your undefined solar plexus friends, if they're correct, if they're not afraid of confrontation, they will confront you about the emotional stuff that hasn't been processed. So I started to say, and then I interrupted myself, there are two traps for the defined solar plexus. The one is emotional repression, not experiencing the emotion, not going into the emotion. It's emotional constipation, not letting the emotion out, denying the emotion, minimizing it, rationalizing it, pretending it isn't there, refusing to experience it, intellectualizing it. All of this. For instance, I have a friend who has the 1949. That's his emotional definition. And he's absolutely convinced that he doesn't have a jealous bone in his body. See, the 1949 is where all jealousy comes from. It's flirtation, 19, which elicits material resources, 49. But in exchange for those material resources, there's ownership, there's possession, possessiveness, jealousy. Well, he is convinced he doesn't feel jealous at all. And yet other people around him are constantly getting jealous. Perfect strangers feel jealous. People who are not normally even feeling possessive at all start to get possessive because of the conditioning he puts out there. But the thing is, the conditioning will be the stronger the more it's unprocessed. If he were to process his own jealousy, it would depotentiate that jealousy field in others. It's the same with 25. I see so many 51 people who are highly competitive who don't necessarily acknowledge that competitiveness. They're not really going into it, or they're not giving themselves an outlet for it. They're not expressing it. And then they wonder, why is everyone trying to compete with me all the time? I'm not a competitive person. Well, yeah, you are. You're just making everybody else competitive with your competitiveness because you're not expressing it yourself. If you express it, then they won't be. And it's the same for this 1949. The more you experience your emotions, the less other people will express them and have to live them out. It's like the black sheep in a family unit, in a penta. The black sheep is the one who's taking on the burden of expressing the negativity of the rest of the family. Well, that's what it's like for defined solar plexus people. If you're not experiencing your emotions, other people will, unconsciously, and they will live them out. So if part of you is sad, and you're not going into that sadness, other people are going to feel sad. If part of you is angry, and you're not going into that anger, other people are going to feel angry, and so on. So the first of the emotional traps for the defined solar plexus is not going in to the emotion. The second is trying to release the emotion as quickly as possible. Excuse the crude metaphor, but we could say if the first is a sort of, emotional constipation, the latter could be, well, you get the idea. It's this inability to contain the emotion, this inability to go into it, so it's impulsively releasing it. And this is where the decision making goes wrong, because in that moment, you're low on your wave, you've painted a painting and you're unhappy with it, and you tear up the painting, And then the next day, you're full of regret. And you wonder what would have happened if you hadn't done that. Or, conversely, you have an opportunity to do something, and you're afraid that opportunity is going to leave, it's going to go away, and you jump to say yes, to take that opportunity. And it is true, as a fourth line, you are here for opportunities. And yet, because of not waiting for that emotional wave and not being able to contain that excitement is released into the world with this tremendous force that is the decision to commit yourself to something that's not correct for you. So you can see that there are these two traps, the not feeling the emotions or the feeling them too strongly and discharging them and not sitting with them. See, emotions are meant to be savored. They're meant to be experienced, they're meant to be savored the same way you would savor a good meal or a perfume or a sip of wine or scotch or a chocolate, the same way you would savor a sunset. This is what emotions are for. It's the juice of life. It's the juiciness. It's the excitement. It's the color of life. It's the scent of life. It's interesting. People who come into human design and they learn about the solar plexus, the emotional center, sometimes get it confused with the ego. Because the ego is touchy. The ego is threatened. Well, the undefined ego is threatened. The defined ego is threatening. Let's be honest here. They threaten people without even realizing it. If you do this, I'll do that. These are threats. That's the defined ego. But in any case, there's a real touchiness. So take the undefined ego in particular and its touchiness. And it gets emotional. It gets choked up. It cries. This is undefined ego. Right? There's emotionality. When someone says, you're getting emotional, they're usually talking about the ego, not the solar plexus. The solar plexus is different. It's different. It's the color of life. It's the fullness of life. So we have this emotional being really designed to move slowly, designed to make decisions slowly, and yet with so much definition and with integration circuitry. And with this definition and integration circuitry, it might not always be easy to move so slowly. But here's someone designed to make decisions slowly. This is not a splenic being who makes decisions in the moment. This is an emotional being. All emotional beings are designed to make decisions slowly, to play hard to get. And the thing is, playing hard to get works for them because the solar plexus is in demand. It's in demand. Someone with an undefined solar plexus plays hard to get. They do miss out on that opportunity. But with a defined solar plexus, someone offers you a job, I'll think about it. They ask a couple days later, what do you think? I'm not sure yet. I'm going to take a few more days. And that's the opposite of how most people act, because there's so much pressure, and the solar plexus exerts a lot of that pressure on oneself and on others. There are emotional pressures. But it's correct to make decisions slowly. And then, split definition needs time for these areas of definition to connect. That's 6447, the gate of confusion and coming to have these epiphanies. This is a very busy mind, a busy mind, very active and very confused. It's not like gate 63. It's not like the 63-4, which can be very mentally still, even though it's activated. This is a busy, active, experiential mind processing experiences over and over again, coming to understand them in different ways, thinking about them from different angles. And that process is going to yield epiphanies and realizations and coming to understand all sorts of things and to dispel that confusion. We have second and third lines. So there's going to be a certain amount of trial and error, and there's also going to be a certain amount of discrimination and discernment that goes into it. And through this discernment and trial and error process, that confusion is going to be made sense of. And there's going to be epiphanies that come about that cut through that confusion. But this entire process, this entire experiential process of going from confusion to clarity cannot reach the rest of the body graph. There's a channel in between it. So unless the 1762 is present, or the 4323 is present, or the 1156 is present, there's no way for this clarity process to reach the rest of the body graph. There's also no way for the rest of the body graph to feed new information into this process of confusion to clarity. So again, slow decision making. Even without the solar plexus, I would say here's somebody who needs time to make correct decisions. Not that the mind should necessarily, it's not that the mind is making decisions. The mind is just giving information to the rest of the form so that the rest of the form has the information it needs to make decisions. So the advice goes, which I give to everyone who is split definition, which is the conventional human design advice, as Ra Uru would call it. Find places where you can be private and public. Private and public, this was his term. You know, cafes or restaurants or movie theaters or places where you can be by yourself or work on things on your own, but where other people will come and go from your aura. So the chances of somebody sitting down within your aura who has, in your case, the bridging channel, are good. And when that bridging channel occurs, that information can flow, and there will be realizations that occur that have been queued up. You know, to understand how a split works, you can look at partnerships that have splits. Even if both of the individuals in the partnership are single definition, even if they're both single definition, when they're together, if there is a split, they will exhibit the following behavior. When they're alone together, something will happen, and it won't come up again until that bridge occurs. Ra nicknamed it fighting in public because you have people who something happens and then 3 days later they're in public and they get the bridge, and all of a sudden here they are bringing it up from 3 days ago because it's unresolved. See, splits cannot resolve things until that split is bridged. Now, this does not mean there's anything wrong with the design. Part of the deconditioning process for split definition people is to acknowledge the perfection of their design, to stop wishing that they had this or that bridging gate. Now, in wide splits, this happens less, right? In wide splits, you don't really see, oh, if only I had gate 43, then everything would be okay. If only I had, you know, this gate, then I would really be free from frustration. You don't see that in the wide split. The wide split blames everybody else. If only they had it. So here, looking at these, you know, splits, it could be, if only anyone had opinions worth listening to. If only anyone really knew what they were talking about. If only anyone were able to come up with an original idea. If only anyone was interesting or stimulating. If only, but nobody out there. They're all so boring. They don't know how to structure their ideas. They don't know how to explain things in a way that others can understand. They don't have interesting opinions, and they don't know the details. It's all their fault. If they were detail-oriented, and if they had opinions worth listening to, and if they were good storytellers who were stimulating and had new ideas, and if they were able to structure things in a way, and on and on and on. And this is the not self of the wide split. If only the resources were there. If only there were people who were actually interesting and stimulating out there. But alas, they're boring, so I'll be frustrated. And alas, they don't have any interesting opinions, so I'll be frustrated. And they're not able to structure their thoughts in a coherent way, so I'll be frustrated. And it's not true. It's the not self, right? The not self for the generator, or for the manifesting generator, is basically frustration. Now, you have a manifestor channel. We have in this chart here the 3536, one of the 4 manifestor channels, and which directly connects a motor, in this case the solar plexus, to the throat. So there will be anger there too. That's what I'm saying. There will also be anger. Oh, I'm so angry. Nobody else is there for me. I'm lacking. Really not I'm lacking. They're lacking. They are the ones who are lacking. My parents are lacking. My coworkers are lacking. My boss, my employees, my partner, my friends, my colleagues, all of this. My teachers, my students, they're all lacking. And seeing this lack in the other, that is the not self. The not self of the wide split sees that the other is missing something that they need and has this feeling of having to do it themselves because the other doesn't have it. What the other has, you don't want, and what you want, they don't have. And it's just not true. It's not true, but it's in the design. It's the not self of the wide split. And you couple this with the undefined ego. And the undefined ego is there going, I better stay in control. Better prove to them my stamina. That's gate 21. The stamina to stay in control. Biting through. The stamina to keep biting through. The stamina to put up with all the other people trying to get control from you, trying to control you. I'll prove how much discipline I have. I'll prove how much willpower and self-control and self-discipline. I control myself. I control how much food I eat. I control how many cigarettes I smoke. Whatever the case it is. And then 51. That 51 in the undefined ego, the not self of the activated 51 in the undefined ego. I'll prove to you that I have the guts. I'll prove it by jumping into the unknown. I'll prove it by jumping off the high dive. I'll prove it, by shocking everyone around me. They'll be so shocked when they find out that I went there not knowing anything about it, that I did the drug that has never been tested, that I, put all my belongings into the back of a hatchback and drove cross country, not knowing where I'd end up, not knowing anyone there, and so on. It's jumping into the unknown. And then there's those completely open channels, that 26 and that 40, which reiterate the theme of the wide split. It's missing. Things are missing. I have to do it myself because nobody's there with, say, 44. I have to take it upon myself to have the nerve because nobody there is going to give me the resources I need. Or looking at that 4037, I have to do all the hard work myself. I have to have the capacity because there's nobody out there who will give me that affection that I need. Gate 37. Where are the friends? Where's the family? And so on. Now, for split definition, even for wide split, I would say the centers are a secondary theme. So it's important to understand that that undefined ego is going to be there, augmenting at every step the feeling that others are to blame, that others are lacking, that it's other people's fault, that other people don't have, in this case, the ideas, the details, the opinions, and so on. The inner vision, or inner hearing, as the case may be. And what is the solution for this? You're confronted with the not self. Well, emotional clarity, of course. It's the emotional clarity that will bring you to the right places, to meet the right people, to do the right work, to use your energy correctly. And that emotional clarity is always going to be up against a mind saying, you got to do it yourself because you can't depend on the other. You got to do it yourself because they're lacking. You better come up with the ideas because nobody else has them. If you don't read the details, nobody else will. You can't trust your lawyer to read the details. You got to do it yourself, you know. But with the solar plexus, there's the possibility for clarity. And out of that clarity, there's the possibility to align with the right forces in your life. We're looking at a fourth line here. We're looking at a 4-6. For the fourth line, the forces in their life are everything. If all your friends work at the flower shop, you'll work at the flower shop. You'll make bouquets your whole life. There's no way to work anywhere else. For the fourth line, the world they inhabit, the people they inhabit, the network they inhabit, keeps them locked in to those specific opportunities. And I know fourth lines who have ambitions, who want to enter into a different world. And I always say, know the person whose job you want. You want to be a librarian? Get to know some librarians. But not as strangers. See, the 4-6 has a real problem with strangers. The problem is mainly that they embrace them as friends. And the fourth line needs true friendship. It's here for true friendship. And they invest so heavily in people. The fourth line invests so heavily, and they need a return on that investment. And if they're not aligned with the right forces, if they're not in the right place, if they don't have the right friends, and so on, they're not going to get that return on investment. And then we have the sixth line. The sixth line, which goes through its tripartite life process, which spends the age of approximately 27 to 34 or 28 to 35 climbing on the roof. So by the time they're in their mid-30s, and not before, they're on the roof. So many people I meet 27-year-old sixth lines saying, wow, the roof, it's great, isn't it? I'm like, you'll see. You'll see, because you're not there. And by the mid-30s, they're there. And by there, I mean that they're really not there. They're not there for anybody else. They're there on the roof, but they're not there in a relationship. They're not there for their boss or their employees. They're not really there for their friends. Oh, they're still investing heavily if they're a 4-6. They're just not there. They're not involved. Some part of them is held at a distance. Some part of them is aloof. And this is correct for them. It's correct for them. It can be hard for someone they're in a relationship with because, you want to be in a relationship with a 4-6 on the roof. You'll have a friend, sure, but they're not really there. They're not, they're not really in it. In fact, the sixth line has the possibility of achieving that soulmate dream they gave up in the first third of their cycle, in the final third, when they come down off the roof. That's the potential for the soulmate or not bonding. which is not to discourage sixth lines. The sixth line process is beautiful. It's one of the most incredible processes. It's a contemporary thing. Historically, sixth lines never came off the roof. Historically, they were lucky to get up there. And now to have this potential for true blossoming, through true flourishing as yourself that the sixth line has, is beautiful. It's so beautiful. The sixth line goes through the meat grinder of its 20s. They realize, all the mistakes they can make. And if you're a 4-6, those mistakes are going to be related to people, because the fourth line is all about people. And that mistake phase is going to be surrounding yourself with the wrong people. How many 4-6s get involved with criminals? And then going on the roof, looking back on the 20s and going, wow, I was so involved. And then being able to now see into so many other people's lives. There's a real voyeur quality here. And finally, this potential, and it's just a potential, but the potential to come off the roof and to live truly as themselves, singular. But the life of the fourth line, friends are everything. Network is everything. The fourth line is magnanimous. They're the Robin Hoods. They take opportunities. They have a friend who has a swimming pool. Now all their friends get to use the swimming pool. Funny enough, there's a binary. The one who provides resources to the fourth line doesn't usually get access to other resources. Whereas it's the ones who give them nothing who get access to these resources. It's the ones who have nothing to give. This is the Robin Hood aspect of the fourth line. And the fourth line can be so kind, but they can also be so mean. Fourth lines can be the meanest of all, the kindness, meanness wave. It's shocking for those who know them when that meanness comes out. Shocking. Well. But for the 4-6, it's about their opportunities. It's about what opportunities they can get access to. And they can't take all their anchors up at once. I think it was Peter Rowe who talks about this, himself a 4-6. The human design practitioner who's done so much work on Incarnation Cross. And, Peter Rowe talks about your job is an anchor. Your relationship is an anchor. Your home is an anchor. Your friends are anchors. A 4-6, a fourth line of any kind, a 1-4, a 2-4, a 4-6, a 4-1, cannot afford to lose their anchors at once. When you ever see a fourth line embracing strangers, they're really desperate. Someone's raised their rent, they got their hours cut back at work, they broke up with their partner, their friends aren't hanging out with them anymore. They start to embrace strangers. They start to go on Craigslist to look for the next job, to look for the next place to live, to look for the next relationship. This is absolutely categorically wrong for the fourth line. Be patient. Be patient. Trust. Human design requires tremendous patience and something like faith, which is a real joke if you know how anti-religious human design is. Because religion is of the mind. Because there are 16 fundamental religions all competing with each other. And there's only one form principle where competition is impossible. And whether it's Taoism or human design, if it's form principle knowledge, it is what it is. And it's not religion. And yet there's something like faith. Simply patience. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? That's the ancient Chinese saying that Ra Uru Hu loved to repeat. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? You get something, you get good news, you can be guaranteed you will get bad news at some time in the future. And you get bad news, you can be guaranteed you'll get good news in the future. For those who study tarot, this is the wheel. It's the wisdom of the wheel. And it equalizes everything. So, faith. The fourth line isn't here for strangers. It isn't here to branch out from its network, except through its network. It's here to expand its network. Fourth lines can be the most powerful, influential people. Fifth lines are often envious of them. Ra, of the fifth line, would joke, I tell the truth and it falls on deaf ears. And a fourth line tells a lie and it goes halfway around the world. Fourth line is the transmitter. It's how things are transmitted. It's how colds are transmitted. It's how viruses are transmitted. It's how memes are transmitted and ideas. It's how human design is transmitted. It's the fourth line. It's influential. And it's easily influenced. This is why it's so important for them to be with the right people. Now here we have a cross of the Sphinx. The cross of the Sphinx does a fantastic service. You look at the cross of the Sphinx, you see 4 gates in the G center. 4 gates that are about direction. You have the 1 and the 2, kind of the alpha and omega of the I Ching. The fully yang and the fully yin gates of the I Ching. The creative and the receptive. And you see that for the cross of the Sphinx, these people give direction to others. They point them in the right direction. They give them direction in life. These people are signposts. The cross of the Sphinx is a signpost. This way, not that way. And as a 4-6, it can be a signpost for opportunity. A signpost that brings opportunities to others. There's a lot of obligations here. There's individual, integration, tribal, and collective obligations. Collective experiential. There's no logic. There's no logic here in the chart. But there are experiential obligations. What do I mean by this? Every channel you have is a life force energy you put out there. And the life force is obligated. The life force is the only obligation there really is. Integration circuitry. Your 3457 is obligated to survive. It's energized to know. 34 is power, you have power skills and all this stuff coming out of 34. 57 is the seed of intelligence and of intuitive knowing. So we have this power to know. It's doing and knowing. It's knowing what you're doing. Really. And how funny, so many who don't have that, who don't know what they're doing, literally. They're doing it, you have a 3420, and they're missing that 57. And they're busy, and they're doing. And they're busy in the now, really. They're doing in the now. They're just doing. They don't know what they're doing. That 57 is missing. They don't know what they're doing. You know what you're doing. We have the 360, the most powerful channel in this body graph. The most powerful life force energy in this aura of this being. And that 360 we're looking at is the individual format channel. This can dominate not just the form, this can dominate a room. It's the pulse. It's melancholy or not. It's new and old. It's the novelty of the new that emerges and the boredom of the old when nothing new happens. Oh, individual people can be the most bored people you've ever met. They can just hate this Solomon's world, this mundane world of nothing new under the sun, and yearn for something new to emerge. I like the joke from Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, where Rosencrantz, the obviously collective being, says, "Guildenstern, I'm so excited, we're going to a new city. There'll be new restaurants. There'll be new music. There'll be new people to meet. There'll be new sights to see." And Guildenstern, the individual, goes, "But it'll be the same sky, Rosencrantz. The same sky." That's what it is to have an individual format channel, or to have prominent individual circuitry. That's what it is. It's the same sky, nothing new, and waiting for that pulse to bring mutation. And of course, the standard advice for the individual, when you're melancholy, don't try to figure it out. Don't try to explain it. Melancholy is not meant to be traced to its genesis. Melancholy is not meant to be given a reason why. It doesn't need a reason why. The why is not relevant to the individual. In fact, the why will crystallize that melancholy into depression and rob it of its vital fecundity. No. The standard advice for the individual in their melancholy is to never try to explain it. And, contra so much self-help out there, melancholy is a time for aloneness. Melancholy is a time for turning inward. I love the 3635. We see this purely unconscious 3635. Here's someone who has adventures, who has an obligation to have adventures, who has an obligation to share those adventures with others, who has a yearning to get out there, to experience the world. We have Gate 41 as well. I mean, Gate 41 is where it all starts. Gate 41 is the fantasizing about what's out there. And then it gets there, and it's nothing like the fantasy. But that's okay. That's okay. That's part of the experiential way. And with that 3635, I love doing partnership analysis for couples that have this. I always tell them, if you want to stay together, you have to have adventures together. You have to have a lot of excitement together. Now, Ra Uru Hu, in his Channels book, puts it a little more bluntly. He says, literally, you have to have new places to have sex. I don't say it as bluntly, but basically, 36 is the only gate in human design about the literal act of copulation. And it's true that it yearns for new experiences. It yearns for exciting experiences. It connects to the throat, to that 35, the I feel. I feel is one of the authentic voices for this being. When this being says, I feel ... the words that come next carry a weight to them. There's a truth to them. I feel is part of the voice of this person. Then we have the 8-1, the verbal gunslinger. You see this in so many movie stars and comedians and singers, and it's verbal fluidity. It's one of the three, I believe, verbal gunslinger channels, so called because it's there, ready to go. It's ready to snap back with its snappy comebacks and snappy retorts, with its creative, sometimes very unusual. I mean, it's individual. It's a freak too, but it's there. It's there to come up with its creative, unusual expressions. Yeah. The Sphinx, the cross of the Sphinx. Someone who, in their correctness, out of their emotional clarity, after the ratcheting wave has crashed, when the nervousness has subsided, is able to be a signpost for others.